we're now reaching the point where artificial voice and other kinds of automation are going to make it possible for us to write a video script or write documentation and have it automatically turn into reproducible video that can be generated on demand in multiple languages. And I think this is going to change everything. And where it's super important for tech writers is that it's exactly how well you write your documentation that will have everything to do with how easily we can make that leap to essentially single sourcing like docs and training.
Welcome to the Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast, where 𝐊𝐞𝐲 of Document 360 finds the best SaaS self-service knowledge bases in the world and then interviews their creators. Let's get started with today's episode.
Good day, everyone. Our guest today is Mary Conner, technical writer at Civitas Learning. Welcome, Mary, to the Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, Mary, please help us understand a little bit more about yourself and how did you initially get into documentation, please?
Well, I started out as I was going to be an English literature professor. I was in a PhD program, but I just got married to someone who is going to be an academic as well. And I knew we weren't both going to get tenure track jobs in the same school. So I needed something else. So I got out of PhD, got into a master's program in tech writing, which I didn't know what it was. So I learned everything, took the course, and I ended up teaching it for a while. And then I finally got a job at an R&D lab. And then I'm like, if I could get into this software thing, that would be awesome. And once I got in, I never went back.
Great. So congratulations on the PhD part as well, Mary. So BA and MA in English, and how has your extensive English background helped you in your technical writing career?
It's helped me tremendously in terms of awareness and control of language, right? That's so much of what we do. But interestingly enough, what was more important for me than the literature part was the teaching part, because throughout my academic career, I was teaching all the time. And my experience of being a documentation writer is that I'm teaching people on paper. My orientation is very much about being a teacher, analyzing my audience, understanding what they need, figuring out how to, reach them, how to come up with metaphors, to build the conceptual bridges that we need to get them where they need to go. So in that sense, the background has served really, really well for what I'm doing.
Very well said, Mary. And I just would like to understand a little bit more about your LinkedIn. In your LinkedIn page, you say that work to build authoring environments that free agile teams to write and diagram information as easily as they code. Can you please break this down to me, and what is your approach here?
My approach, so let me clarify that most of my career, I've been working in startup companies, in smaller environments where things are more dynamic. In other words, there's not a larger organizational mandate that things have to be done a certain way. There's usually been some kind of freedom to change the tools or change the processes, to fit whatever I'm trying to deliver. So that being said, what I have grown into is a perspective that in order for me, there's never going to be enough of me to go around. So what I want to do is to figure out how to collaborate as effectively across the organization. So when I'm picking a tool, I am going to choose in the direction of a tool that my teams are already comfortable using. So if they're already established in a tool base, I'm going to try to work within the tool base. Like that, in my experience, has been the highest level of success, is if I could figure a way to expand where they already are, what they're already comfortable doing, how they already do reviews of their own content, and also to get my arms around all their content and their content problems, and in solving their problems, pull them into documentation creation. I also really found that they have got to have a good tool, and usually this means like a free or almost free tool so that everyone in the organization can have it, some kind of tool where they can be diagramming and can go in and edit diagrams so we can communicate with each other, and then I can clean them up and turn them into customer facing material. But the idea that it shouldn't be, in my experience, it's a big problem if there are these powerful rarefied tools, that only a tech writer gets to touch, or only a product designer gets to touch, and no one else can participate. That's really not going to be where you're going to get the huge payoff in changing tools. So I want to bring everyone on board. I want to give everyone the tools, and I want to meet them where they are. And not make them.
Fantastic. Very
Go ahead.
inspiring, Mary. And first of all, thank you for breaking this down. And to be really honest, I really wanted to know what exactly it meant. So absolutely wonderful to know this, Mary.
Good.
Super. So please talk a little bit about your documentation process at Civitas Learning and who's normally involved in defining such processes.
This is a super interesting situation. The company's been around over a decade, but I am the very first tech writer. They've never had one before. This has been an organization. It's my first organization, I realized, that hasn't actually been engineering driven. And they have not had their tradition of having the tech writer. Docs have always been done kind of by a committee of people, people who are working in training and enablement or whatever. Everyone would contribute and do pieces, but nobody owned it. So you can imagine what the situation was like. So the answer about process is I'm currently starting to build them out and figuring out what works. And that's tied to moving us to different tools that are going to work for the larger things we're trying to do. The answer is it depends. So in this case, the process is going to be about working backwards from release dates. So that's always the first priority, right? Is to make sure I've got the new releases coming out and I've got coverage for it. But at the same time, I'm trying to do these heavy lifts of migrating the old stuff and pulling things together. This is a situation in which you could look up a piece of content and there might be 4 different versions of it out there, and nobody knows which one to use or is the current one. So that is a very urgent situation for me to try to resolve. So I'm trying to keep up with the releases and be working on that process first. In the future, what the process is going to look like is what I've built in other places, where it's going to be about a knowable cadence of prioritizing. Okay, this is how we're going to take care of releases. This is how we're going to take care of, all these other pieces that have to go out and the whole publishing chain. However, it's also going to be about how I can move upstream and start doing more of the UX writing.
Great. So there's quite a lot to handle in the next coming months.
Oh yeah, it's in a very dynamic place right now. Yeah.
So what is the key to crafting documentation that attracts both the customer that both attracts and serves the customers?
So both attract and serve. This is so many dimensions to that question. Hugely, it needs to be less is more. Like, nobody wants to read documentation. So I spend a huge amount of effort in making it as visual as possible. And when I say visual, it doesn't just mean pictures. It means that there's structure, that there's headings, that there's forms, that there are tables, that there are diagrams, that at a glance, at a page, you can actually get a whole bunch of information and walk away without actually sitting down and reading everything word for word. So this kind of fits with how users jump in to get content. They search for something, they have a problem, they jump in, they jump out, jump in, jump out. So I have to support that cognitively. Also, a lot of work on tone and clarity and speed. So marketing writing tends to be, forgive me, a lot fluffier, right? And it's like trimming out as much content just so they can get the content that they want. But really, in terms of joy and happiness for customers, it's about they're looking for a piece of information and they get it. They find it. Because what happens is if you do a search and you come up with nothing, or you come up with fluff, it just makes you angry, right? It just makes you irritated, makes you less likely to open it the next time. So for me, the quality of having what I call content density, really high content density, where the stuff that's in there is relevant, is not obvious. Don't tell people, To print, click the print button. It's like someone's going to slap you. So don't do that to them. Actually give them information they need. And then when they have that experience of getting their needs met, then they're going to come back. And also that they generally, if they have a new experience with the docs actually being helpful, we hear about it because they'll end up telling that to their, enablement team or whatever. So everyone finds out.
Super. Can you help me with one more question, Mary, here? Are your documentations currently publicly available, or is it all private behind a username and a password?
As with most companies I've been in, the urge to, protect their intellectual property has been really strong. Like, we don't want to have to out there. Our competitors are going to read things and learn too much, like you're putting too much detail in. So currently where we are is some of the content that I have analyzed and negotiated as being, not either so high value or somehow sensitive in terms of intellectual property, that there's a portion that you can get to that is not password protected. And why this is important is that we use another tool to present help within the product. And so to make sure that when you click on the help in the product, you're not being stopped by a login wall and unable to get to your help. Like, that's a really bad user experience. So that doesn't happen. You can get to the essential help, but you do go through a login process in order to reach forums or webinars or a lot of the more advanced topics. So right now it's a compromise, and that's working. I do have it set up just to kind of make it easier for the people who have worries in the company. Is I do have the website set up to not allow the search engine crawlers, right? So we're not trying to pull organic traffic to the site right now. We just want to serve the users. Yeah.
Fantastic. So good luck with that one, Mary. And this is something, again, I read in your LinkedIn post. Internal documentation tends to be something that many people avoid reading. So why is it okay that people don't read the documentation you produce?
A big part of why it's okay they don't read it is if I'm doing my job really well, lots of times they won't need to, because my goal, how to put it without sounding insulting, to my own job, it's kind of the last resort is to write something up. Like the next best thing is to actually have it in the product. And this can include, like, we have internal parts of the product that the customer never see. If there's a way that I can pop up the help or the information right there for the person who's making the configuration decision, I want to have it up there and not send them off to some doc to go read. But better yet, if I could get even farther upstream and get them to fix the interface and change the confusing words, then maybe it's going to guide them to do the right thing. And we don't even need to have a paragraph of explanation about how to do it differently. So I've always been very, very, I don't clutch my pearls and think of myself as a writer, and my precious writing, and people need to see how beautifully I write. It's so that, no, the goal is I want to get as far upstream as I can. And if I can make sure you don't even need to go to my docs, that's great. So generally for internal documentation, if there's a way to solve the problem some other way, my experience is it's better to do that. Short of that, if we still need to have, the big brain dump documents that go into all the detail, make sure, to that other problem, that everyone knows exactly where to go, that there isn't duplicated content. So they're having to, coordinate, like, oh, well, that dog is out of date, but this one's up to date. And so ignore that one, like having to figure that all out. No, that's what really makes teams go slow. And they don't trust them. And so then they go, I'm just going to go ask Tim. Tim knows. And it's like, no, that's what we need to stop. So it's the clarity and the accuracy of the documentation. That's, if you got to have it, then make sure that that's the goal.
Great. And again, you've been in this industry for a long time. So in your opinion, what has been the most important innovation when it comes to document tracking?
Say more what you mean about document tracking. You mean document management?
Yeah, it can be that as well, document management, or you've been in various roles. with regard to technical writing and in this documentation space, right? So what do you think is the
Mhm.
most important innovation you've come across?
Oh, interesting. It just keeps changing. I think, I mean, I could talk about tools or things like that, but honestly, I think the big change that is super exciting as a tech writer has been the rise of what we call UX writing, and the idea that the writer should be absolutely in there helping to design the user interfaces and to manage what we called in my last company, the languaging of everything. And this ties into internationalization and localization, but the idea of being, put it another way, that there's such a thing as an information interface, right? As well as a user interface. And that we are essentially the product owners, or can be, of the information interface. And the implication is we sit in kind of a different chair at the table, and that we belong in all these different meetings and all these different types of design, that we can do our user advocacy. We essentially advocate for the user in this chair and figure out how to use all aspects of language throughout their whole customer experience. So I feel that the innovation of the tech writer being not like a role, but more like a capacity that can be applied, depending on the organization, that can go everywhere and can lift everything. And it can also mean that you go in and you solve the horrible, gnarly content problems that are going on in the organization, right? Where they have duplicated content across teams and no one can figure out what they're doing. So that has nothing to do with the end user documentation, but that can have everything to do with, the health of your company and how quickly, what their cadence is for being able to do their work. So that by backing up and seeing us as being the knowledge people and the just the fluidity of it has been tremendously exciting to me as I've gotten, as the decades have gone by.
Great. Super, Mary. So I think with that, we've come to the end of the general questions, but I do have a couple more questions in the rapid fire round. Anything else you would like to mention before we move to this rapid fire round?
Oh boy. One thing that just if people aren't aware of that is out there that I think is tremendously important and exciting is we're now reaching the point where artificial voice and other kinds of automation are going to make it possible for us to write a video script or write documentation and have it automatically turn into reproducible video that can be generated on demand in multiple languages. And I think this is going to change everything. And where it's super important for tech writers is that it's exactly how well you write your documentation that will have everything to do with how easily we can make that leap to essentially single sourcing like docs and training. I think this is a huge and important area for this world that we're moving into.
Fantastic. Good luck with that, Mary. Okay, my rapid fire questions now. Who have you learned the most about documentation from in your career?
Oh, the absolute prize goes to Tom Johnson. And he is, the guy is brilliant, but he started out, because I watched his entire career, and he started out first being the sponge and interviewing everyone and everything, getting all the information. And then once he had all the information under his belt, then he started writing all the blogs that I wish I'd written. It's just like, oh my goodness, he answers everyone's questions, he solves everything. And also that he put out like API training when no one else did, free API training, which was huge, is what we all needed. So hats off to him. He's a wonderful model.
Thank you, Tom. Can you also share a documentation related resource you have consumed recently?
Yeah, kind of an interesting one I wasn't expecting was there's a conference called Config, and that is for Figma, which is a tool for designing user interfaces. And it turns out that they had a huge number of talks that had to do with content design and with UX writing. And so this is kind of the next field that I'm moving into, is how to figure out how to single source for for the product designers, as they're putting together their interfaces and putting in all the text, how can I be in there sourcing and writing all the text that they use in the designs that engineering is using to build the products, how to get integrated into all that. So that's really huge. And then the next most recent thing was Write the Docs publishes all of their community at the conferences. They have all the presentations and they post them for free on YouTube. So I've been busy, in my spare time catching up with those, which are fabulous.
Great.
And the Slack community. So if anyone doesn't know about the Write the Docs Slack community, that's where y'all need to go.
So are you an active participation, a contributor in that community, Mary?
Oh yeah. I contribute to there are so many different conversations going on, but I'm also an organizer for my local Write the Docs group.
Wow.
In fact, I need to set up a breakfast meetup for us. I think we need to do that.
Wonderful. My last question to you today. What is the one piece of documentation related advice you would give to your 20-year-old self?
Oh, my 20-year-old self. I would say I would love to reassure my 20-year-old self that what I'm actually doing is being a user advocate, is being a teacher, and that I should never, ever, ever fret about not having the specific domain or engineering background, because it turns out to be my superpower. So the fact that I don't have the background in it means that I have very high user empathy and awareness, and it makes me be able to write much better docs. So not to be insecure about that, just go for it.
Absolutely. So Mary, it was wonderful talking to you today and sharing, and thank you once again for sharing some of your experiences, and good luck with all the community activities you're currently doing and planning to do in future. Anything else I missed to ask you today?
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
Fantastic. So I know it's early morning for you, but all the best for your project and any new initiatives you're planning to take internally.
Ooh, the big one is I'm migrating content into WordPress, because that's where our new learning management system went. So I want a single source content with the self-paced training. So that has been very exciting.
Yeah, I know it's a big task on its own.
Yep.
Super. So have a good day, Mary. Bye.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast. Please head to iTunes, rate, and provide honest feedback on the podcast. See you next week.